The BMW i3 was always a peculiar electric vehicle. It didn't have the longest range, the best looks, or even the cheapest price tag, but it drove like a proper rear-wheel drive BMW, and it handled corners like no other EV on the market. But not every EV customer values driving dynamics over driving range, making the i3 a rather difficult proposition over its competitors, which offer more range and cheaper prices.
But the i3 still has one trick up its sleeve, and that's the i3s, a performance model aimed to add a bit of spice to the flavor. That gets you an aggressive body kit, you get wider wheels, ride height has been lowered, track has also been widened, you get these black finishes, a rear spoiler out back, you also get this Melbourne red paint. It gives it the i3s a bit of a lower stance, a very sporty stance. It makes it look like one of the best EVs on the market today, definitely the sportiest. Now the i3s gets a boost in power thanks to some software tuning. It gets an extra 14 horsepower and 15 pound-feet of torque. Along with the new bearings for the electric motor and wider wheels, it actually goes from 0 to 100 1/10 of a second quicker than the regular i3. That's 0 to 100 in 7.3 seconds. Not bad for such a light car. Total output, 184 horsepower and 199 pound-feet. Now BMW has left the steering and the rear-wheel drive layout untouched. What they have done is added a sport suspension to the mix, so you got firmer springs for a slightly sportier ride, along with that lowered ride height and widened track. They've also retuned the stability control system for quote-unquote mild and controllable drifts. That's exactly what they say in the BMW press release. They've also added a sport button too, which weights up the steering a little bit and adds a bit of juice to the power delivery. You certainly won't find that on the Nissan Leaf. Now let's talk about range, because I know that's going to be important for a lot of you viewers. For battery-powered only i3s's, you get 172 kilometers of range, but if you opt for the range extender, for those like me who will suffer from chronic range anxiety, that boosts the total output to 285 kilometers. Now, initially, I did find it a little ironic. Here is a sporty EV car that's trying to increase its strength by decreasing its endurance, all in a market where price and range are arguably the biggest deciding factors on purchasing an EV. Usually, when I'm driving an electric car, I'm worrying about the range, my destination. All these thoughts come rushing into my head because the car is just so damn quiet, and all I hear is my thoughts. But with this car, it makes you want to drive fast. It makes you want to take the twisties, the long road, just to juice out all the performance out of this car. But it's easy to forget how quick the i3s really is. Sub 200 horses doesn't sound like much, but you have to remember this is a very light car with a very rigid carbon fiber intensive chassis. It feels so quick. It doesn't feel as quick off the line as other EVs, but once at a rolling stop, once you're rolling and you floor the gas, it's so quick. It just picks up and goes. It gives you that sort of light feeling that you might feel when you're on a roller coaster. Now BMW says not only is power up for the i3s, but the spread of that power, the horsepower and torque, the spread of it throughout the power band is much wider, so you get more of that power more of the time, and you certainly feel it. Now the i3s was designed from the ground up, so the chassis is very rigid, and it's a very willing dance partner despite its awkward size. It's very boxy and very upright, but it's willing to really tackle corners if you let it. The center of gravity is so low, all the weight is placed near the floor where the batteries and the engine is. The suspension is firmer, you do notice it. Body roll is actually a lot less. That trade-off is that slightly bumpier ride when you're driving around town. That being said, it's not taxing or jarring enough for me to complain about. I can definitely live with this on a daily basis. There's also one more thing I want to talk about, and that's regenerative braking. It's probably the first thing that people need to get used to when they first start driving an electric car. It's when you let off the gas pedal and the car automatically slows down to recuperate that kinetic energy and use it to recharge the battery. Now, unlike other electric cars, you actually can't set the strength of that regenerative braking, like in the Honda Clarity, for example. Here, it's just one setting. That being said, the i3s, I feel like it's much easier to modulate than the standard i3. It's not as jerky or as nauseating. what happened before is every time you let off the gas pedal, all the occupants just start flying forward. They got jerked forward. But now it's much smoother. See, watch when I let off the gas pedal. It's not as bad. It's much more easy to modulate. That being said, you can actually come to a full halt without even using the brake pedal. You can just let off the gas and just slowly let it come to a stop. It's actually quite aggressive. It actually turns into a bit of a fun game of how little of the brake pedal can you use in your daily commute. The only thing that's a little off-putting for drivers behind you because the brake light doesn't come on. So to them, you're sort of not stopping at all. Now you sit very upright in the i3s, which gives you a really nice driving position actually. The controls here are very low, so you never really have to raise your arm too much to get to a rotary dial. And the windowsill makes for a very nice height for putting your arm out and cruising. It gives you a nice little throne-like position, kind of like in Range Rovers and Land Rovers. There's even a little center pass-through here for storing your bags, items, or if you just want to play footsies with your passenger. There are excellent sight lines all around. There's not really any blind spots because there are 3 windows on each side, and you can really peer out, and there's really no obstructions. You have this really big sunroof here too, but unfortunately there's this little panel that runs in between, separated into essentially 2 sunroofs. Lots of interesting materials here used in the cabin. A lot of this is sustainable materials made from things like kanaf, which is a type of seagrass. You have recyclable materials, wood. It's really neat in here. It's funny how BMW has managed to amalgamate all these recyclable materials and leather to really create this luxurious cabin. There's also many storage options around, like these little cubbies here. You also get this little swoopy little crevice underneath the dashboard, which is really cool. You can put your keys in your phone there, but there's no textile materials underneath to grip it, so they will go flying around if you do take some twisties. You know, a little flip-up glove box just over here. That, and there's also a trunk in the back, go figure. There's also a little trunk in the front. It's very small though, so I usually put my charger up there, or very small bags. I have a few issues with this car. First is the gear shifter. It's clunky and it's kind of hard to use. You really have to stick your thumb in there to reach some buttons, especially the start and the park button. It's also a little counterintuitive how to shift the shift to drive and reverse. To go to drive, you have to flip up. To go to reverse, you gotta flip down. So if you ever find yourself doing 3-point turns, or if you're parking, really your intuition tells you one thing, but the letters tell you something else. It takes some getting used to. Probably my biggest concern are those rear hinged suicide doors. They look cool, they swing outwards like that, just like a Mazda RX-8, but they're not the most practical. The thing is, if you have someone sitting back there and you need to drop them off, you have to open your door first before they can open theirs. Have fun dropping the kids off at school. You'll have to open your door every time. Not the most practical. Fact of the matter is, if you value price and range as your top priorities, i3s isn't for you. You're going to find much cheaper and longer ranged alternatives out there. This i3s specs out at 66 grand after options. The Ontario government will give you 12 grand in incentives. That's still on the pricey side. But if you value driving experience as a top priority and need an electric car, the charm and wit of the i3s really doesn't disappoint. The ability to carve through twisties with nothing coming with the tailpipes gives the i3s a bit of an attitude, though quirky as it may be. Gets rid of that boring electric car stereotype and keeps the essence of a fun-to-drive BMW afloat. I'm Calvin Chan with Canadian Auto Review. Thanks for watching.